Hello and welcome to So What, the Trust Insights live stream. Man, I haven't broken anything yet. This is fantastic. We are here.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's still early, though. We've got, you may have noticed that, of course, Katie Robert, CEO, is not here. She is traveling this week, as is Christopher Penn. So I am stuck. They've left the clown in charge of the circus.
And brought me in. I mean, this is great.
And turned the clowning up another notch just for you. The one and only Ginny Dietrich is here. She is founder and CEO of Armit Dietrich. And you probably already know her from the Spin Sucks podcast, Spin Sucks website, Slack community. She is the creator of the PESO model, which we're going to be talking about. That's what, and normally I kind of get into the stories, but I have to follow the so what, very dry and to the point thing. We have promised PESO, and we are going to deliver that right out of the gate here. Everybody gets what they want. We've got a bunch of live streamers on too. Feel free to throw in questions via the chat from whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're watching. But Ginny, thanks for joining me today.
It is my pleasure. And I have to tell you that 30 seconds lasts forever in two occasions. One, when you're riding your bike as fast and as hard as you can for 30 seconds. And two, when you're waiting for this to start.
No, okay. So the rundown.
I was like 36, 35. Oh my gosh, we're not there yet.
It hasn't happened yet. No, and I have a whole little routine. I have this special claw that I have to wave in front of the camera right before time elapses. It's just become a thing that we do because it makes everybody else laugh. I don't know why I do it, but
because it's weird, but you're fine.
So yeah, here we go. Chip, your co-host is already heckling from the crowd.
Yeah, that does seem appropriate. I agree.
All right, so we'll hide that and go. But let's jump in. Now, you've come up with a framework for marketing communications PR called PESO. Tell us about that. Give us the thumbnail of what it is and what it does and go from there.
Sure. So the genesis of PESO model, which is paid media, earned media, shared media, and owned media, really was in my agency. We were trying to figure out how to create work that was more consistent and drove results for our clients. And what we found is that, 10 years ago, we were doing a lot of media relations and reputation and crisis work, which is great. And it's profitable and all those kinds of things. But when there's not something happening, there's a lull, right? And clients don't like to pay an agency when they're seemingly not doing anything. And because there would be sort of these peaks and valleys, clients would go, well, what are you doing right now? And we're like, well, we're pitching, and they weren't able to comprehend that. And so we were looking for things that we could sort of even it out so that during those valleys, we had something that was consistently going on that we could use to drive results. And this was at a time that social media was becoming a thing, and certainly blogging was becoming a thing. Podcasting wasn't quite there, but it was on the cusp. So there were these things that were happening that we were like, oh, wow, we can actually use these tactics in our toolbox to help sort of even out the work so that there's something always going on, and use that to drive results that an executive cares about. So when I wrote Spin Sucks, the book, I talked about the process, and I talked about how we were doing this and why, and the kinds of things that you could do. You could do blogging, you could do social media, you could do search engine marketing, you could do influencer marketing. There were all these things that you could do. And my publisher said, this is great. It needs a name. And I was like, but I already wrote the book. And she's like, no, we can do a second draft. I'm like, no, I already wrote the book. And she's like, no, we're going to do a second draft. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do a second draft. So we went round and round and round. And they actually helped me get okay to use PESO because it's a currency, right? So we didn't know if there was going to be a copyright issue. And so they worked us through that. And so we named it the PESO model. And then she said, great, we need a graphic to go with it. And I'm like, but I already wrote the book. And she's like, yeah, but we can do a third draft. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It never ends. Yeah.
It never ends. So I hired a designer. He created a graphic, and the book was published, and here we are.
Yeah,
finally.
But it is just a classic example of taking something really huge and complicated and building a framework around it, and now anybody can run with it because we have our whole traction model that we've put together, and PESO just fits right into it. There's a whole chunk of like all the possible marketing things you can do. You just plug PESO right in there, and it solves all those problems.
It solves it all. Yep.
And gets it to go. Now, how about, you were talking about measuring too, though, and being able to kind of show what you do. How does measurement fit into PESO, and where do you go with that?
Sure. One of the things I think from a PR perspective, especially, is that we are really challenged with measuring the work that we do because we do brand awareness, right? So brand awareness is extremely challenging to measure. You can certainly do it with, aided and unaided brand awareness studies. It's expensive. You can really only do them once a year. You can do sentiment studies. You can do those kinds of things. But what we have found, especially in the last 5 or so years, is that executives don't really care. What they care about is this money I'm spending with you translating to dollars? And if you can't prove that, we're not going to work with you. So bringing in the PESO model as your foundation really helps with that, because now you have more than just media relations. You have content, you have social media, you have search engine marketing, you have all these other pieces that you can measure and you can show. Yeah, so okay, we did some earned media, we did some media relations, and a story ran in the Wall Street Journal, and here's what happened. We had a 30% increase in unique website visitors, and here's what they did. 10% of those subscribed to our marketing email, and 5% downloaded content. And like, you can actually prove that now, especially from a digital perspective. And the PESO model allows you to have all those tactics in your toolbox to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned this 5-year window too, because as part of this deal as co-hosting today is that I'm going to run this as Marketing Over Coffee next week. So we're going to repurpose it.
Oh, great.
And so for our listeners over there, you've talked to them. Last time we talked to us back just before the pandemic. And one of the things that you had laid out then was that you thought that over the next 5 years that communications and PR would just be rolled into marketing almost entirely, just because of what you just mentioned about executives that only care about results. They don't care about the structure. But has that really come to pass? I mean, or do executives now just view this all as marketing, or is PR comms still a thing?
It depends, for sure. It depends on the organization and what the executive, sort of how the executive was quote unquote raised. If an executive came up through the ranks on the sales side, they don't give a shit. If they came up through the ranks and communications was a big part of what they know, then they do. So we will have one client that's a global client, and they have a 20-person communications team. We have another client that has a 35-person team, but that it's the marketing team. It folds under the chief marketing officer, and everything, even the communications team falls under that. So it depends. And we have another client where we report into HR. So it used to be that we only reported to the CEO, and now we're reporting to a CMO or HR in some cases, or still the CEO.
Okay. And Chip did ask, will I be paying Ginny for the extra second use? And I have to say, yes, we will be paying in double the Totino's party pizza that we normally send to Ginny for this kind of stuff.
That's such a great inside joke.
How about, bring us up to date too, though. So again, as last time we talked to us prior to COVID, how has that changed everything? Like, I know you were just getting involved with Syracuse, like everything was going to take off. You were going to be doing PESO at the college level, and suddenly there's no college. So what's, going on there?
Suddenly there's no college. Yeah. So we launched the PESO model in partnership with Syracuse University on February 20th, I think, of 2020. And we all know what happened. But the good news is that what we found is it didn't go the way that we planned, which I think is the case with most things, right? Yeah. But because everybody was learning virtually, and the PESO model course is a virtual course, we were able to insert it into classes really easily. And we still do that. So I think we're in 41, between 41 and 43 colleges now, universities now, into their PR programs. And we've created this opportunity for anybody who's graduating with a PR, marketing, journalism, or advertising degree. In many of those cases, has a PESO model certification, which is fantastic. And then what we have found is on the professional side, a PR or marketing professional, they are taking it as well to either evolve their skill set, learn a new skill set, learn how to implement the PESO model, and become certified in the model. So we do a nice little run there as well.
All right. And one thing that gets passed up, a lot of, people focus on being able to dump this stuff into channels specifically, but a big thing that you talk about that I love to hear more about is having a communication strategy where you're running the same stuff across every channel, where you're getting some, value by having it be on all fronts, because so many organizations are just pumping stuff, it's completely unrelated garbage across the channel. So how do you get your clients, on all in order and get all the ducks in a line so that it's all moving in the same direction?
Sometimes it's very challenging. We have one client who hired us almost 2 years ago and said, we want you to implement the PESO model inside our organization. And we were like, great. And my team and I got in there and realized that they had each of the media types. They had teams for they had a paid team, they call it growth marketing. They had an earned team, communications. They had a social team, and they had a content team, which was great. But they didn't talk to one another. So you're right. All of this stuff was happening, but they weren't working together. And then they also have an internal team who was creating their own content and sharing it internally. And employees were super excited about it, but it wasn't going external at all. So that's what we found is they had these great big silos. So we probably spent the first 13 or 14 months breaking those silos down and helping them develop relationships with other people on the teams and not hoarding information and, sharing, here's our editorial calendar, or what can we do to boost some of this content or do some sponsored content. So I would say in the last 7 months, we've actually been able to start doing real PESO model work, but it took us more than a year to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy how that, again, people can just be going in different directions, and to take over a year to get it in line and back where it should be.
Yeah.
I had a question come in. John Blue said he was not able to make it today, but he did want to ask about press releases. What's your current take on press releases? That's the short answer, and that'll work for audio only. So, John, you heard that here first. Is there nothing left of that then? Do you completely throw that overboard?
Yeah, I mean, there are situations if you're doing investor relations, for sure. Like if you have to report through the SEC, absolutely, you need to do a news release. But for the most part, nobody really cares anymore. And you're pitched all the time, John. Right? Does it work for you?
No. Oh my God, those go to the dumpster so fast.
Right? It's so fast. You don't care. No one cares. Send me a 3-sentence email that tells me why I should pay attention, why I care, and what you know. And by golly, if I get one more email that says, I love the Spin Sucks podcast, you should have so-and-so as a guest. We don't have guests.
Yeah, that's worse for you. Like we at least do have guests, not here, but on Marketing Over Coffee. So
right.
But yeah, the best is when they screw up the form, and it's like, hey, I love every episode you do of the Marketing Book podcast. And I'm like, yeah, no, that was for Doug. I'm the next guy.
Right. That's for Doug. Yeah,
that's
right.
great. Yeah, they just messed this up.
We should just share.
Have like a unique rejection template that everybody can go back to. Yeah, I've got one. Surya actually sent in a question here asking about, as you're doing campaigns, how do you judge what's successful or not? And, is there any other model besides PESO to consider for that? I
mean, I don't think there's any other model besides PESO, but certainly there are integrated marketing communications models that you can use that work. But, one of the things that we look at is, and I'm going to take this with a grain of salt if you do consumer or nonprofit work, because we only do B2B, but the work that we do has to be related to marketing leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and conversions. It just does. Everything that we do has to point to one of those 4 things. And because we're using the PESO model, we can say, okay, our earned media efforts drove this number of marketing leads, and then our owned media efforts took those marketing leads and drove a certain percent of them to marketing qualified. And then, all this other stuff that we do from a PESO model perspective generated sales qualified leads, and then we hand it over to the sales team. So when we're reporting on things, I'm really careful to say the marketing and communications program influenced, and then I say a dollar amount. So I just sent a report to a client yesterday for February, and it said our program in February influenced $379,000 in revenue. The sales team gets credit for converting that, right? But we have influenced that by nurturing them through the process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how about as far as the marketing mix too? Because we've talked in the past about how, PESO, it works, but actually paid is not the first choice. Like most people would lead with owned. Right. Do you have a formula for that? Or is it that you go into every client and come up with a plan based on what they're doing?
Yeah, it depends on the organizational goals, right? I mean, there are some instances where you would start with paid. If you're trying to sell widgets in the next 2 weeks and sell out of Target, that's a great place to start with paid. But for the most part, especially if you're using PESO from a comms perspective, it really is you're building thought leadership, authority, and reputation. And to do that, you need to start with owned.
Okay. We have another comment. Our company is charmed by burning in the background.
Rebecca, thank you for noticing.
Oh, it looked like an eagle.
Oh no, it's Bertie. He has the mittens and everything.
And he's masked up. Oh yeah, he's at the inaugurational festival there with the.
My mom made that for me.
Oh no way, that's handmade too. That's not.
Yeah, she made that. Yeah.
That's bespoke. All right, well, swing on over to Pinterest for only $99.95. You can get your own Bernie doll made. We'll set this up a small fee for Jenny's mom, but that'll be excellent. How about now, since we last talked, TikTok is on the scene. Is that on your radar at all? Are you doing anything with that? And is that something that people need to be paying attention to?
I mean, it's like anything else, right? It depends. I would say for consumer businesses, especially fashion and food, yeah, you should be. For B2B brands that we work with, no. And I'm also really paying close attention to what is happening from a government regulation perspective. There was an article just this morning that talked about, Biden is behind the bill to start to ban TikTok, and they've already banned it on government phones, which I think makes sense. But that could become an issue for sure. And so you have to really pay attention, not to just the trend and what's happening and how you can potentially use it in your own business and your own comms or marketing program, but what's happening more globally as well, because it could very well go away tomorrow.
Yeah, there's so much going on that front. I don't know what happened here, but StreamYard suddenly just woke up and pumped like 25 comments into the stream here. So I don't know what, something was broken. And even my camera is out of focus too. I don't know what this is ridiculous. The dumpster
This is
fire.
what happens. This is what happens when they leave you in charge.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the dumpster fire everybody's been waiting for in the mix. We finally got. All right, there we go. I'm back. This is back. Rebecca asked if your mom would make a Chip Griffin doll. So
absolutely, yes, I will have her do that. That's a really good idea, Rebecca. I like it. I'll keep it back there during the agency leadership podcast.
Yeah, and Chip has said a voodoo doll that you could stab.
Every time I stab him, he's like.
He'd say, "Well, it depends."
It depends, right?
All right, back on track. Let's get the bus back where it needs to be going here. Twitter, everything going on over there. Are you steering folks away from that? Is that still, should that be part of your S factor?
We're not steering people away. I laughed out loud when Chris earlier this week. Was it earlier this week that the Twitter was down because somebody was messing with something? And it's like Chris takes great joy in the dumpster fire. It makes me laugh. It makes me laugh really hard. But we're not steering people away because still, I mean, for what we do for a living, still reporters are using it pretty liberally to find sources and story ideas. So from a communications perspective, we are definitely not steering people away. But we aren't doing anything new. Like we were launching a new podcast with a client and they wanted to do it on Twitter Live. And we were like, no, let's stay away from that. Let's not put our eggs in that basket. So, from that perspective, we are steering them away, but not entirely.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. It's just so bizarre. Well, how about as a comms person for yourself? It's so bizarre that we have a media outlet and yet all of the internal company politics are playing out right in front on the stage in front of us. I mean, and the insane thing is that it's crossing over to Tesla as a public company too. I mean, this is just bonkers.
It's nuts. Something happened last week. Their stock price dropped because of the recalls. And I was like, well, that's because their founder is busy putting another company into the ground. Like
doing random stuff. Yeah. I've never seen anything like this. It's amazing. And we'll keep an eye on it. But so that's, again, something to steer, but it is interesting also that there is no recipe for channels. Cause like we see this all the time. We see so many customers that, just LinkedIn is where they need to be because they're that B2B audience and that's where the fit is. But then there's other clients where it's still Facebook ads. I mean, for everything that people have said about Facebook too, there's folks where that's, where their audience is.
Yep.
I don't know. Is there anything new on that front too, as far as when you go in with the client and start putting this together, determining which channels you want to run with? I mean, if they have some successful ones, great. But where do you start to look when you want to suggest other things to try?
It depends on the organization for sure. But what we find is that most are on LinkedIn and not doing anything else. And so we look at, we'll look at Instagram for sure, depending on which organization it is. We look at Facebook as well. But Instagram ads, they work really well. And I know that people are like, I don't want to give Facebook any money, but man, they make you a lot of money.
Yeah. No, the turnaround on that kind of stuff is just amazing. If it works right for you, you can just jump into it. How about, and working that for customers, as far as how far, your agency goes, do you actually get in and start to do that kind of actual tactics for customers, or what's the breadth of service that you cover?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned that we have one client that has a 20-person comms team. And so with them, what we're really doing is strategic coaching and consulting and helping them just, outline a strategy and then giving them a plan to execute internally. And then we have several clients who don't have a marketing person. And so we become the marketing team for them. And in those cases, the goal is to hire, onboard, and train a marketing team so that eventually we either exit or we do more strategic consulting. But that's actually the work we love the most because we're inside but not employees, and it's really fun work.
Yeah. I mean, what do you enjoy the most? I know one thing that with stuff like that is you do get to be the truth teller. So many organizations are doing campaigns and the people, involved with them are vested in their success. So they don't always give the best info.
Right.
What other things do you enjoy about it though? What else makes it, the strategic side better to work?
I think it's that. It's also, just doing the work in a different way for an organization and showing success. Like I mentioned earlier, we influenced in February $379,000 in revenue for a client in 1 month. That's super compelling, right? That's really fun work to be able to say, this is everything that we're doing. And we also have an opportunity to your point where we can say, this isn't working like we thought it would, so let's try this. And many executives really appreciate that approach where they're like, okay, well, let's stop spending the money there and let's put it into here. For instance, we have one client who was spending about $7,500 a month on Google ads with literally no success, none. They didn't have anybody running it. They just had ads created and
just burning cash.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was like, no. So we shut the ads off probably for about 6 months. And then we said, okay, we're ready to reinstate this, but you have to actually have somebody running it. So then we brought somebody from my team in to run those ads for them. But yeah, it's really compelling. Because we get to actually do the work, which is a lot more fun than coaching and consulting.
Yeah, and there is the value of now when you talk to other clients, you know what you're talking about. You actually have your hands dirty and know how that stuff runs.
Yep.
One thing in the rundown, we did promise that we would talk about where to get training on PESO for your agency. I know you have the Slack community, you have courses available. What are the best ways to get your team up and running with this?
We have the PESO Model certification, which is a certificate from Syracuse University, from their School of Public Communications. And it's probably the most robust thing that you can do. There's certainly, places on the internet, like with PRSA and other places where I've done less expensive training, but it isn't the full robust plan. And it doesn't include the certification. So if you want to be certified in the model, the best way to do it is you can find it on SpinSucks, but get that certificate from Syracuse while you're doing it.
All right. That sounds great. Yeah, I know. Normally we have to have people tell us where to plug them, but I know spinsucks.com is just the one stop.
It's easy.
Yeah, we don't have to spend time. And so I wanted to give a plug too for Strava. We are both on Strava. I always get a laugh whenever I do a workout and I see a thumbs up from Ginny. It's her sticking her tongue out at me on my watch. Which
my husband bought me a shirt for Christmas that says, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. It's true.
Yeah. People don't realize the dark side to Strava. People think it's like a happy workout thing. They don't realize that there are groups of people who punish those who don't post.
Yep, it's true.
It's like Stephen King Spinner, if you've actually read, to dig way back on old school references. All right. it seems I have like the wheel of shame that we usually spin, and it's NFTs, AI, or whatever the shiny object of the week is. But
right.
we talked beforehand about AI. Is there anything peso related in AI that you're looking at or interested? I mean, obviously copywriting has been talked a lot about lately, but what's on your radar?
Yeah, I would say the copywriting for sure is, I have a really, really talented writer on my team, and she had writer's block a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, I can't get past this, and I know I have a deadline. And I was like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to ChatGPT. I want you to log in, and I want it to create a first draft for you. And she's like, can I do that? And I'm like, I'm your boss and I'm telling you to. So she did. I was like, well, I don't want the first draft. I don't want what ChatGPT pushes out, but it'll give you something to react to, so you're not staring at a blank screen. And it worked for her. So, we are looking at it from that perspective. I love Chris Penn's analysis of all this, which was probably 5 years ago now, where he said, the robots aren't going to replace us, but you have to sort of become the conductor of the orchestra. So you have to know enough about all of the pieces to be able to say, yes, that's doing it correctly. No, that's not. Here's what needs to be improved. Here's what we're going to tweak. So you're conducting the orchestra of artificial intelligence to be able to get what you need. And I think that's a really good description of where we're going.
Yeah, it's interesting, all the stuff that he's thrown out about that. It's just obvious that his prompts are so much more effective and powerful than the average person, because he's thinking about it as a designer. Even last week, he was talking about just telling ChatGPT to list your data and separate it with pipes, because then it will do hashes that you can just import right into a spreadsheet. And I was like, oh my God, I'd never thought of pipes.
I wouldn't have thought of that either.
Yeah. So again, it's right on mark of like, oh yeah, it makes the world better for people like Chris, who are already in positions of power. For the rest of us, we're just in trouble.
We're just in trouble.
But that's kind of how that rolls. All right. Yeah. So again, anything else going on though on this front that you have to talk about? You have events coming up, or what's keeping you busy for the next few months?
No, we don't. Family is keeping me extraordinarily busy right now. But before we started recording, I think you guys are seeing this too. We've seen a massive input on speaking engagements, like massive, in the last 2 weeks. So I think people are getting back out there and hiring speakers again and doing events again. And, it only took 3 years, but here we are.
All right. Well, so family stuff has been keeping you busy. Any, reading, books, music, movies, anything else keeping you, that's got you interested that you can recommend? I will take that laugh as a not so much.
No, I'm laughing because we're watching Descendants right now.
Okay.
So we watched Zombies 1, 2, and 3 last weekend on Disney Plus. So yeah, that's
You're a big Disney Plus family. Okay, that sounds good. For the right age group, you cannot beat that service. That's the best money you'll ever spend in entertaining the 12 and under crew. That's for sure.
Yeesh.
All right, that sounds good. Well, again, spinsucks.com if you want more. I have to do all the Trust Insights plugs, which I have failed to do as we go here. The biggest one is where is this? Dang banner. No, this is legit. Come on over to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Ginny is over there and watching. So if you ask her a question, she may even answer it. And of course, the SpinSucks Slack group is a great place for PR and communications folks. Otherwise, that's all I've got. Ginny, thanks for spending some time with me today.
That was so fun. I was happy to. They should go on vacation more often.
I'm not going to tell them that. You can tell them that.
I can tell them that.
I'll tell them that. This week, let me do the roll out. We thank everybody for taking the time to check out our show today. That's going to do it for this week. We will see you next week. And I don't know how else I'm going to end that. I've never had to end the show before. I'm just like stuck with. I could tell about that amazing time that I swam the English Channel and then.
Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.
You're still here. It's over. Go
Oh,
home.
goodbye.
Go home.